Alright guys, here is our first lesson, chapter 1, section 1. This lesson talks about a plan for problem solving. So first off, we want to talk about what our 4-step plan is. In our 4-step plan, obviously there's 4 steps. First we have understanding. After we understand it, we're going to make a plan, we're going to solve it, and then we're going to check it. Now in each of these 4 steps, there's some different things to think about. Under our understanding step, we want to read the problem quickly to gain a general understanding of it. And after we've read it, ask ourselves questions like, what facts do I know, or what do I need to find out? And then, is there enough information to solve the problem, or is there extra information? We always want to find out if we actually know enough, and also go through and maybe cross out things that we don't need to know so that they don't distract us. Once we feel that we have an understanding, we're going to move on to that plan step. We're going to reread the problem to identify the relevant facts, determine how the facts relate to one another, make a plan and choose a strategy for solving it. There could be different strategies. So as we go through and I solve some of these problems today, keep in mind you may have done it a different way and still come up with the right answer. And then we're going to estimate what you think the answer should be. Once we have that estimate, we're going to go ahead and solve it. We're going to use that plan that we just came up with. And if the plan doesn't work, we're going to revise it and make a new plan. Remember, mistakes don't mean we're done. Mistakes mean we go back and come up with something new. Finally, once we have our answer, we're going to reread the problem and make sure there isn't another solution. Examine your answer carefully and ask ourselves, is my answer reasonable and close to my estimate, and does my answer make sense? If your answer is not reasonable, make a new plan and solve the problem another way. And you might also want to check your answer by solving the problem again in a different way. We don't always have to do all of these steps, but if you see a problem and you're not sure what to do, think about these 4 steps and dive right in. Okay, so our first example here. A tower of a free fall ride at an amusement park is 251.5 feet tall. The ride begins to free fall from 18.9 feet below the top of the tower, and the brakes are applied at 41.4 feet from the bottom. How long is the free fall portion of the ride? Alright, so we want to think about what facts do we know. We know that the ride is 251.5 feet tall. We know that the free fall begins 18.9 feet below the top of the tower, and that the brakes are applied 41.4 feet from the bottom. Now, we want to find out how long is the free fall. So as you can see, as we go through, don't be afraid to underline, highlight, circle, anything that helps you pick out those important facts and kind of ignore everything else. Now, before we start making a plan, it might help us if we draw a picture. So, what do we know first? We know that the entire ride is 251.5 feet. That's our whole ride. Now we know that the free fall begins 18.9 feet below the top. So we go below the top, 18.9 feet. And we also know that the brakes are applied 41.4 feet from the bottom, so we go up from the bottom. And we know that this is 41.4 feet here. So our question is, how far is this middle section? So if we know the total, and we're taking away these 2 pieces, we're going to subtract. So there's our plan, subtraction. Maybe off to the side. Our plan is to subtract. Now, in order to check our answer, we want to do a quick estimate. So 251.5 feet is about 250 feet. 18.9 is about 20. And 41.4 is about 40. So there's our estimate numbers. So we're starting with 250 feet, and we're going to take off or subtract that top portion. Now we're left with 230 feet. Now we want to subtract that bottom portion where the brakes were applied. So our free fall is about 190 feet. So there's our estimate that we can use at the end to double check. So now let's go ahead and find out what our actual is. Now we're going to be following the same method we used over here, but using our actual numbers now. So our actual height is 251.5 feet. And we're going to take off that top portion of 18.9 feet. Go ahead and subtract. We should end up with 232.6 feet. And next we subtracted our 40 feet, which in reality was our 41.4 feet, to find out that our free fall was actually 192 feet. We want to make sure we label everything. Now we want to double check. First off, our actual is very close to our estimates. So far so good. Now we want to think, does that answer make sense? Well, we knew that the free fall was 251 feet, so we had to be less than that. We're taking away 41 feet and away 18.9 feet. So yes, our answer does make sense. We double checked. Circle our final answer of 191.2 feet. All right, one more problem for our notes today. Mel used half of her film to take pictures of her dog. Then she took 10 pictures of her cat. She has 14 exposures left before she runs out of film. For how many exposures was the film originally? Okay, so this is kind of a work backwards problem. We want to go through and decide, what does everything mean? Well, if she used half, that means that we're going to be dividing by 2. She used half of them to take pictures of her dog, so that's divide by 2. Then she took 10 pictures of her cat. Well, if she took 10 more, then that's subtracting 10 from the original. And she has 14 exposures left. So again, like I said, this is a work backwards problem. So she ended with 14. So that means in our plan we're going to start with 14. If she took 10, that was subtracting. So if we go backwards, we want to do the opposite. We're going to add 10. So at this point, there were 22 exposures on her film. Now next up, she used half of the original, so I was dividing by 2, so again, working backwards. That means we're going to do the opposite, and we're going to multiply by 2. So she had 48 exposures to begin with. Now how could we double check this? Well, if we started with 48, and going through the process, she used half. So half of 48 divided by 2 gives us 24 exposures. Next, she took 10 pictures of her cat. Taking 10, when we subtracted 10, that gave us 14 exposures. Double check. Yes, she started with 14 exposures, so we know that worked. Final answer of 48 exposures. Alrighty guys, that is your first lesson. We will double check some of this stuff with you tomorrow to make sure you understood everything. Make sure you come in with any questions on anything that didn't make sense.